Heritage is a very wide topic, and when I think about heritage, I think of course about the national heritage and the family heritage, which are not the same. And I was born at the eastern part of Ukraine, and half of my family is from Russia and half of my family is from Ukraine. So when I was raised, I was somehow raised with both of these heritages. But when the war started in 2014, I somehow understood which part of this heritage for me is really somehow mine, and that's how I started to learn more and more about my Ukrainian heritage and about the Ukrainian part of my family. And it's of course the clothes, some kind of traditions, songs, dishes also. I think food is very big part of the heritage. And in Ukraine at the moment there is a huge campaign about Ukrainian dish borscht. You probably know about it, and now it's in the UNESCO heritage list, and it was a huge fight and we are very happy about that. So I told you that I'm from the eastern part of Ukraine, and I'm from Luhansk, which was occupied since 2014. So I actually had to leave my home twice. In 2014 I left Luhansk, and then in 2022 I left Kharkiv. So both times I had to take something to remind me of my family or of my roots, if you wish. And this kind of the process of choosing what you would take is first very emotional, but also it's kind of very random. You probably know that if you know that the war is coming or something, some catastrophe is coming, you would pack this emergency bag with you. And for all the people I know, and for me and for my friends and family, these emergency bags were all different. And what people would take with them would be very much different, because some of them would take pictures. I don't think I took pictures first time, and I didn't take them the second time, but I had some jewelry pieces, for example, some pieces that belonged to my mother, who already passed away, or to my grandmother. I still had one of the necklaces that she used to wear, and this is something that would remind me about my family, which is also a part of my heritage. During this interview we mentioned several types of heritage that I can think of when I think of heritage, and it was jewelry, it was embroidery, it was cuisine, and all of these things are traditionally female things. So it's kind of in our culture to see female body as the person who would preserve this heritage and to pass it over and over the generation. And I think nowadays, when the female role is resynced, and hopefully it will be going on and on, this kind of aspect of female role in heritage, I think it still is there. I think we still can see how females, how women are protecting their heritage in any kind of means. It's very hard for me to understand the male position, actually, because not my father or grandfather, they never passed me something like this. So everything that I now know about my family or my culture, I know from my mother and from my grandmothers. I think it can be different from situation to situation, how the heritage is seen in the times of conflict, because usually when I think about the heritage in this context, I would think about Ukraine and Austria, and I somehow compare the attitude in our countries. And I see that in Ukraine, after the war started in 2014, the interest to the heritage, to the national heritage, was growing and growing. And I think it happened mostly because the war going on in Ukraine is the war of decolonization. So we should think of these processes that are going on in Ukraine as part of the post-colonial discourse. And it's very important to understand that Ukrainians were under the pressure, and they were influenced heavily by Russian culture, not only during the Soviet period, but after that too. And in 2014, when we were attacked, when the Crimea was taken out from Ukraine, when part of Ukraine was occupied, a lot of people started to understand that, and it became more and more obvious. And when the full-scale war started, it was even more obvious how all these 8 years from 2014 to 2022, it was still kind of a huge influence of Russian culture and Russian-speaking world to our world and to our community. So when we see all of this, we understand how important it is to understand our history, Ukrainian traditions, Ukrainian culture, and Ukrainian heritage. But in Austria, it was completely different. We talked about the Second World War and how Austrian cultural heritage was somehow taken by Nazis and in a way to represent Nazis. And of course, after the Second World War in Austria, people naturally didn't want to be associated with this. So I think the heritage and conflict, their relationships can be very different depending on the nature of this conflict and on the nature of this catastrophe.